Now, free will, this is how you handle people who think that humans can act independently of God or Satan or their upbringing or their genetics or the weather or their mortality. Yes, the only way you can be free is if you are immune to all of those things I just mentioned. This is what I do. I say, give me one verse that proves free will. And they're like, ha ha. They think they got a million of them. And they bring up these tons of verses showing people willing, showing people doing, showing people working, showing people responding to exhortations. For instance, one of the best ones is Joshua 24:15. Choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Choose this day. And they bring this verse to me saying, but there it is, proves free will. I said, no, it doesn't. They said, what do you mean it doesn't? It just shows, it doesn't prove anything, it shows that someone, Joshua and his family, is making a decision based on a presentation of good and a presentation of evil. And they decided, yes, I'll admit that all day. They decided, yes they did. They chose, yes they did. They willed, yes they did. Yes they did, yes they did. They willed to do the right thing. Peachy keen. That does not prove free will. In order to prove free will, you have to prove that Joshua had no influences on him whatsoever. Not from his DNA, not from his parents, not from God. A free will cannot be influenced by God. Ouch, God, that hurt. A free will can't be influenced by God. Another verse that I like to have Jesus say, I stand at the door and knock, and whoever opens the door, I will come in and eat with them, and they will eat with me, and we'll live happily ever after. And I'm saying, this is what I say, it's like, I'm still waiting for the verse that proves free will. What does that prove? It just proves will. You can bring me, there's thousands of verses in this Bible showing people doing things. Even Paul with the Philippian jailer in Acts chapter 16, the Philippian jailer says, what must I do to be being saved? Paul says, believe in the Lord and you'll be being saved. Yeah, believe and you'll be being saved. Believe. That does not prove free will. It just proves that the Philippian jailer either believes or he doesn't. Here's the question you need to ask the people thinking that all these verses showing people doing things, showing people responding to exhortations, whether for good or for ill. Here's what you need to ask. Why are they doing that? Well, what do you mean, why are they doing that? They just decided to do it. Yeah, but why did they decide to do that? Well, it was their free will. That's the verse you haven't proven. That's called circular reasoning. No, you're just showing people doing things. There's millions, every single verse in the Bible practically shows somebody doing something. Why are they doing it? And that's where you, my friends, and me, we have crap load of verses that show that no one can will anything unless God operates in them. I have a verse, Ephesians 1:11, that says God is operating all things in accord with the counsel of His will. God is operating all things. That is pretty much, takes all those verses, all things. That's pretty inclusive. So, Joshua 24:15, as for me and my house, we will choose the Lord. Okay? God operated that. Well, how do you know? Because God is operating all things in accord with the counsel of His own will. That was God's will that Joshua do that. That's what God wanted. God energized that operation. What if He would have chosen evil? Well, you could say, relatively speaking, Satan was the influence. Satan is an evil influence, the prince of the power of the air. It's true that God is on top of Satan. Satan just is a servant of the Most High God, as is everything. Everything subserves God's great purpose. Philippians 2:12-13. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God operating in you. God is operating in you to will and to work for the sake of His delight. Oh, if somebody chose evil in the Joshua 24 thing, why did that person... I got proof that this person chose an evil way. They chose an evil way. And I said, yeah, so I'm still waiting for the verse that proves free will. You see, you have to bring them back to that. You're not proving that person's free. That is without influence, with no influence. I got proof that the person's not free. What do you mean, Martin? Romans 11:32, God locks up altogether in stubbornness. God locks up altogether in stubbornness. Here's another verse, Romans 3:10, 11, and 13. There's no one righteous, no, not one. That's the default setting, is stubbornness and unrighteousness. So for anybody to overcome that, it takes a divine activity. Yes, God. It takes God operating. It takes... We know, I've given you this verse many times, this trilogy of verses. We know that faith is a gift, Romans 12:3, Philippians 1:29, and Ephesians 2:8 and 9. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Even in the 4 accounts, Jesus says, no one can come to me unless the Father draws him. No one can come to me. No one can come to me unless the Father does it. It immediately eliminates free will. No one can come to me, that is another evidence of Romans 3:10, 11, and 12. No one righteous, no, not one. Jesus says, no one can come to me. And of Romans 11:32, God locks up altogether in stubbornness. No one can come to me unless the Father draws him. So there it is. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. People think that when there's an exhortation like this, behold, I stand at the door and knock. Whoever opens it, then I'll come in. Whoever doesn't open it, well, screw you for the eon. People think this is an opportunity. This is the assumption. It's a false assumption. It's based on human pride. And it's the assumption that, oh, here's an exhortation. Here's an invitation to do something. This proves that the person must be free. Because how could they do it except they're free? But that's not it at all. They think that the exhortation is an opportunity for the human to show what the human can do. This is an opportunity. The exhortation becomes an opportunity for the human to show God something, for the human to operate independently of God. It's nothing of the kind. That's an assumption. The exhortation now is a blank canvas for God to write a masterpiece on. God paints a masterpiece. It's an opportunity for God to show what He can do through the person. What a difference. An exhortation in Scripture is not an opportunity for the person to show God what he or she can do. No, it's an opportunity for God to show what He can do through the person.
I love it.
An exhortation in Scripture is not an opportunity for the person to show God what he or she can do. No, it's an opportunity for God to show what He can do through the person.
Oh, yes, that feels wonderful.
An exhortation in Scripture is not an opportunity for the person to show God what he or she can do. No, it's an opportunity for God to show what He can do through the person, because God is operating all in accord with the counsel of His will, and God is operating in us both to will and to work for the sake of His delight. Philippians 12:13. No, what's that? Philippians 2:13. Yeah, God, it's so simple when you figure this stuff out. Oh, one more thing. You're not going to believe this, but I tell you, this actually happened, what I'm about to say. Someone who should have known better, who was arguing with me about free will, which is a risky proposition to argue with me about free will, because I just keep it simple and I keep it scriptural. They said, Martin, Galatians 5:1 proves free will. I said, well, this is what I've got to see, because I've never seen one verse yet that proves human free will. I see a lot of verses, people willing, but never doing it freely. And I have many, many verses that show that God is operating all things. Oh, here's another one. Acts 17:24. If it's not 24, it's right around there in Acts chapter 17. God gives to all life and breath and all. God gives to all life and breath and all. All. God gives to all. If that isn't a verse that disproves human free will, God gives, active verb. God gives to all life, breath, and, in case I missed anything, all. That's the only verse I need. I have a bunch more, but it's the only one I need to disprove human free will. God gives to all. And in that same context, in Him we live and move and are. In Him we live and move and are. Sounds like God has everything locked down. Yeah, He does. God locks up altogether in stubbornness that He might have mercy on all. So this person says, I got the verse. Oh, I got to see this one. You won't believe the verse I got. This is the one. This woman says, Galatians 5:1, for freedom Christ frees us. Can you believe that? For freedom Christ frees us. Says right there we're free. Says right there, for freedom Christ frees us. Ladies and gentlemen, whenever the word free appears in the Scripture, you have to look at the context. I can watch someone getting out of jail. They might even be holding a get out of jail free card, and that person is now free. They're free. Did you hear about Billy Bob? Yeah, I heard he's free. Yeah, he's free. I heard Martin Zender say that somebody is free. That proves human free will. Martin Zender's a hypocrite. No. It's relative. He's free in relation to what he was 5 minutes ago, which was incarcerated. What's Paul talking? This is so easy. I'm teaching you to fish. Teaching you to fish. What's the context here? It's freedom from law. It's freedom from law. For freedom, Christ frees us from the Mosaic regulations. We weren't even under them in the first place. He frees us from guilt, frees us from condemnation. He's freeing us from stuff. He's freeing us from the fear of death. We're free. Martin Zender said we're free. Martin Zender's a hypocrite because he says he doesn't believe in free will. Now he says we're free. We're free from the fear of death. We're free from the law. We're free from guilt. We're free from condemnation. We're free from these things. It's a relative freedom. We're free in relation to the fear of death. We're free in relation to having to do the law of Moses. And if you read Galatians, the whole context, the whole frickin' book is the law. It's not an absolute freedom. Please. That's your verse?